it's an advice that I would give to a lot of people. If you want to know if you are good at being an entrepreneur, you have to know if you know how to make money by yourself. And some of the most asset-light businesses around are in retail, because in retail, customer buy you, pay you the money before you actually ship the product. So you have what you call negative working capital needs. So you don't need cash to actually start your business. So it's a very efficient way.
Hello everyone, welcome to Crunch the Numbers podcast. My name is Pedro Mendes. I am a member of Lisbon Investment Society Portfolio Management Department. Today I'll have the pleasure of interviewing Keith Bortoluzzi, creator and CEO of Thread since 2020. Hello Keith, thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
It's a pleasure, I hope you're doing well. So diving right in, I had the privilege of looking at your LinkedIn. Let me say you seem to have a really long but quite fun career experience. Would you care to walk us through it, please?
Yes, of course. It's true. I had a lot of fun working experience that were pretty unconventional. I think it's also the way I stated them on my profile. I mean, my resume was a bunch of very sometimes original experiences. So I started to make money pretty early, probably around the age of 16. And I think I was first and foremost a geek. I got my first computer before I turned 10, and I had my own room. So naturally, I would spend a lot of time on my computer, playing video games, socializing with people. I grew up in a neighborhood where it was not really safe to spend all of your time outside. And so I had a lot of things to do in my room on my computer. And I started, to teach people how to code HTML and CSS on some forums at the time. I loved Photoshop. Like some friends would pay me to design profile banners for them, the image that they would add to their signature. At that time, I remember discovering World of Warcraft and the online communities known as the guild. So I was a terrible player, but I was playing so regularly, that I eventually applied and got accepted as like a forum assistant for some of the very big guilds. Those were online communities. For me, it was a way to socialize with people, because things happening inside the game were a lot more exciting than what was happening on the streets just next to my home. So I was designing event banners, eventually playing casually with top players. So it was my first real working experience, because actually I was not playing the game. I spent probably 4 hours every day creating content, doing project management, like trying to speak in several languages to make those top players meet together and sometimes address some of their needs. I got paid for this because we had a sponsorship from Intel. So they would pay us in kind and they would send us some money on PayPal at the time. So it felt like a real job. It was the first experience that I had. And after that, I discovered some magic cards. I eventually created a marketplace to sell those cards on the internet. And that was before my school. When I had to go to study business, I eventually stopped those side projects to focus on more, let's say, institutional working experiences. I did a bit of consulting, which was nice, but that's fun than my previous experiences, of course. And I created a software company with a friend that I met at Accenture that would automate slide creation on PowerPoint. That was a pain we identified at the time. We spent most of our days working on creating slides for clients. So naturally, a way to automate some copy pasting, alignment things was a nice thing to do. That company was called Power User. And yeah, it was along my studies. So I traveled at the time. I had to complete some more formal working experiences. And I worked for a dairy company in Japan. I worked for an event organization company called Publicis, which would organize like the World Economic Forum in Switzerland. So I tried a lot of things because I think I was super curious. So I would say yes to most of the working opportunities that felt new to me, because I wanted to discover how it was like to make money in different ways and meet interesting people. Yeah.
Nice. I can relate to the World of Warcraft part. I didn't play the game. I had a similar phase in which I talked with other people in forums. That was pretty cool at the time. I wanted to go deeper, if you can, on the trading cards part. So I didn't. I read that you did it. From what you said right now, I understand it's Magic the Gathering. It was those cards? Or
Yeah, I started with Pokemon cards actually, and my grandmother gave me a book of stamps, like very rare stamps. And so I started trading those Pokemon card and stamps, but I eventually lost them, or they were stolen. I cannot remember, but eventually one day I just couldn't find them back. And at that time, it was again my grandmother. She bought me some of those magic cards that a friend had told me about, and I realized that those cards were actually worth something on the internet. As soon as I discovered the forum, I discovered like some crazy conversation with people buying hundreds of euros of cards. For me, it was insane. It was a lot of money, and eventually that's how I started to trade cards on the forum, where I would create the banners. Those were geeky forum, which you would discuss video games, you would discuss trading cards. So I would trade them because I couldn't get the money. I was too young to have a bank account, so I had to trade them. Not to I couldn't be paid by cash or by check, so I would send them over by the mail. And with postcards, and yeah, that's how it started, and it grew and it grew and it grew until it was no longer possible to trade those cards, and I started to sell them. So I created that e-shop um, because eBay was too troublesome to use at the time. You know, at that time, eBay, we needed to like take the picture, name the article, and give a price. So you didn't have that logic of referencing like you have on Amazon. On Amazon, you type the name of the article and you can list 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 pieces. But on eBay at that time, it was more about auctioning system. It's an online classified. So you had a lot of manual work to do. So I decided that I would skip that part and create my own basic website to sell my cards online.
Okay. So from what I read in the LinkedIn, you also had pretty crazy stories. You paid one of your suppliers the briefcase full of banknotes, and you say you generate a pretty big revenue. 30 years
Yes.
salary, right? It was
Yeah, so actually that was not a lot of revenue. It feels like it's a huge number, but it was over the course of almost 10 years. So you have to split that number by 10 to have a kind of annual revenue, which leads you to probably a few thousands of hundreds of thousands of euros a year. But that is revenue for the retail industry. So the margins are so thin. They're actually almost ridiculous. If you buy a cart 1,000 euros, you might sell it 1,100. So it's a 10% gross margin on which you might deduce like storage cost, uh, some stationary things. You had to buy envelope, you have to manually route the address, you have the logistic cost, the price of the stamp, so the insurance. So in the end, I think it paid for my part of my studies, part of my living expenses in Japan, and part of the tournament fees, because I was so bad that I would always pay like 50 euros to enter the tournament, but I never win. I would never win. So it cost me a lot to actually attend all those events. So it might seem a lot. At that time, I felt it was a lot of money. But when you think about this, it was a terrible business.
It's a good business to start practicing, right?
Yeah, no, you're right. I mean, it's an advice that I would give to a lot of people. If you want to know if you are good at being an entrepreneur, you have to know if you know how to make money by yourself. And some of the most asset-light businesses around are in retail, because in retail, customer buy you, pay you the money before you actually ship the product. So you have what you call negative working capital needs. So you don't need cash to actually start your business. So it's a very efficient way. And if you think about it, some of the private, the billionaires of privately owned companies, most of them are in the retail business in Europe. The Aldi, the founder of Leclerc, the founder of Auchan, they're all started in retail, because retail, you can finance your business for a decade without ever needing to raise money. So it's a nice way to start. And I hear a lot of people here and around starting to do drop shipping, starting to do uh, some retail activities on the internet. It's a great way to start, honestly. And you can start from your room right now with e-commerce. So that's pretty convenient.
Yeah, pretty interesting stuff. So currently, at least here in Portugal, switching companies as much as you did is quite bold. However, you stayed at least 1 year, 1.5 years in each company. Maybe two of them you stayed a little longer from what I see. Which one did you learn the most, and do you regret quitting any of them?
Oh, yeah, that's a good question. I think I never regretted um, any of those moves, because I learned so much. But you miss things when you actually switch. And I think what you miss the most are people. You miss your colleagues. And do you remember as a child when you would change class, and that your mother would like sort of try to tell you, no worries. I mean, you're losing some friends, but you're getting new friends as well. And that's life. Okay. I think that kind of feeling happens when you switch from one company to another. You miss something that you know and that you generally care about, the people, your team, your friends, your bosses. I mean, I only had pleasing working experiences, so I cannot say that I hated the people I worked with. So in that case, you miss the people. But I never regret it, because even if it's true that you never know what you will be getting, generally you discover so many things. You learn from different people. So if you change your environment, you learn more, definitely. And that's how I personally grow, by meeting with new people and being in new environments. Is generally how I thrive. So no, I think I like all those moves.
Yeah, I agree. Uncomfortable in new environments sometimes teach you a lot, right?
Yeah,
So, and is there any one company or job that you did that you felt you learned the most, or you don't feel like there was one which you can say?
I think I learned a lot from all of them, but I learned different things. For if you work for almost 10 years full time, even as a hobby on weekends, on something like e-commerce, you will learn a lot about sales, about customer relations, about logistics, about purchasing. So that's a very like tangible business model where you have a lot of sweat equity to put into your business. Then when you go to big corporates, you learn a little bit more about people, how to manage people, how to interact with people, how to get loved by the customers, by your management, how you do good job and communicate. So I think when you go to corporates, communication and management are some of the skills that are long lasting learnings that you can leverage during all your career. So those are very important. I would advise people, if they're thinking about starting their own business, start as a side project and learn as much as you can from companies, because those are successful business. They have done successfully. So there you can understand how this works, and you can do all the mistakes there so that you skip the mistakes for your own venture. No, I cannot single out any experience. I mean, one of the experience that I loved the most was at LFDE. So it's an investment fund. And the way I entered the company was pretty unusual. I was not initially hired by the boss of the investment fund. I was more incubated. So I was not part of the main team. Like, nobody would know me really. There were like almost 100 employees. And I was the guy, the kid in the garage. We were two at the time, and we had our own office, very not in the same building. We were alone, almost alone in our small building, and it was feeling like a garage. We were doing things that, if it would fail, that would not impact the reputation of the company. And that guy, his name is Didier de Mendes. I'm very grateful because he gave us his trust. He trusts us enough to actually give us all the autonomy to create something new. So I think that's probably the most memorable experience that I had at the time.
Okay, by the way, what type of job you were doing in that time?
So we were managing two portfolio UCITS funds. So those were seed funds seeded with a few millions, and they would invest in European listed equities and global listed equities. And since we were covering all the world, we would invest in Japanese company, like Hong Kong-based company. We would stay up late at night. I remember one morning, the boss of the fund would pop from time to time to say hello to us. And he was expecting to find us at 9 a.m. in the morning, and he couldn't find us at 9 a.m. So he was a bit upset because he said, okay, those guys, maybe they're not working so hard, right? What he didn't know is that we spent the whole night before until like 2 or 3 a.m. investing in Japanese stocks and Hong Kong stocks for the global fund. So we were super hardworking, but we went to bed so late that the next day he thought that we wouldn't wake up and that maybe we would manage the fund so seriously, until he realized that we actually traded a few non-European company the day before. And of course, it was funny at that time.
Yeah, that's awesome. So currently you are the CEO and founder of Threads. Would you mind explaining to us a little bit what is Thread and how did you start it?
Yeah, for sure. So Thread started as an applied AI R&D lab. So our take was to work with several asset management company and create the algorithms and create the software pieces that would help them better do their job, mainly investing, making better investment decisions, better reporting, better data analysis. And that business was not, it was a good business, but it was not very scalable because it's a consulting type of business. So the more you grow, the more people you need to hire. And I didn't work with many people at the time. So I didn't know how to build a team and how to manage that team. I was probably 26 or 27. So I was super inexperienced about this. And so I was not really comfortable with the business model of consulting. And I think COVID accelerated a little bit our shift to remote friendly business model, software. Personally, I love products. I would love to build websites, software plugins, databases. So for me, it made sense to create a software. And so whenever we had the opportunity to change the business model because our clients would be less willing to pay for a service, then we started developing Thread on the mission that we can help asset manager make systematically better investment decision by integrating traditional and sustainability investment research. So that's what we do. At Thread, we combine several sources of data with AI tools to help asset managers, investors, sell side and buy side, create the best investment research and eventually make the best investment decisions based on financial and non-financial inputs.
Okay. So getting back a little to the entrepreneurship, did you always know that you wanted to be an entrepreneur and create your own company? Or was that something that came up later?
I didn't know about the word entrepreneur at that time. It was very not sexy. I mean, I've never really knew someone who would call himself entrepreneur. I had some friends who were self-employed. I had a friend who created his like grocery shopping. But at that time, it was not really the entrepreneurship that we mean today with technology and all. Actually, I remember asking my mom, okay, maybe I would like to be a software engineer. And at that time, super software engineer for her meant the hardware guy managing computers at the big company. So it was an IT guy in the support function. It was not something super sexy. I mean, I liked that thing, but I never knew it was named entrepreneur. But eventually, by the age of 18, I already knew how to make money for a living. So it was not a constraint for me to find a job. I was not forced. I loved the idea to be able to work rather than study. So I decided to work for others and on my projects to learn as much as I could. But it was not a conscious, there were not a single moment where I said, I want to be an entrepreneur. It's more like, I have always been doing things that I like. I will continue to do things that I like. And some people in the VC space sometimes told me, yeah, now you're an entrepreneur. And well, fine.
I guess I am, right?
I guess I am if you say so. Yeah.
Yeah, from what I can tell, you seem to have the mindset for that from really early on, from the World of Warcraft type work you did in the forums to the card trading, etc. You just didn't know the word, right?
Yeah. It's true that every time you have a strong feeling for independence and you know how to sustain yourself, financially speaking, I think you can consider yourself an entrepreneur, and you don't need to have a big company or be financially successful. You need to be aligned with your own personality for this. And obviously, that's not the personality of a lot of people. And even if entrepreneur is now sexy, it's a very risky business. I mean, a lot of company fail. You can lose a lot of money. You invest a lot of your time, and you can lose not only money or time. You could lose precious relationships because you work with people, and sometimes it doesn't work. So it can be something risky. So you have to love doing this, and it has to be part of you.
Yeah, I agree. And you have to have also some confidence in yourself, right? Because you're throwing yourself
Yeah.
a little alone to the world, trying to do something you like and make it work.
Yeah, that's so true. I mean, if I would single out one thing that a lot of entrepreneurs that I met shared in common is self-confidence, not arrogance, really self-confidence. That is the unfair advantage that a lot of entrepreneurs have over the rest of the people, is that they believe in the impossible and they believe that they can do it. It does not mean that they will eventually do it or they will be successful, but they think it's doable. And if you think about it, the clusters for entrepreneurship in San Francisco or in Tel Aviv in Israel, they have the same thing in common. If you talk to them, they will say, yeah, why not? That idea is crazy, but maybe you can do it. And I think you need at least a lot of self-confidence, because overall the world do not need you as an entrepreneur. You're not existing. You're believing in a world that is not currently existing. So 90% of the people you will meet will tell you that's bullshit. You will fail. You will not be able to raise money. So you have to trust in yourself, at least a little bit, to be contrarian and go against the grain, at least in terms of how credible and viable your idea or your project is.
Yes, definitely. So this is a little related, and maybe we have talked about it already, but do you have some major tips for a young person that wants to be an entrepreneur?
Uh, yeah, I think what I told before is what I would say now again, that you need to find something that you really, really, really care about. Find a problem worth solving for the world according to you, that you will like to work on 80 hours a week for the next 10 years, and then you go and try. And you try and you will pivot and you will meet people and you will fail. And sometimes you will have small wins. But if you believe that the problem is worth solving and you find people to believe in what you say, because they buy your product, because they support you, they want to work with you, and you keep up for 10 years, you will likely be successful. I mean, I don't know if it's financial success, but at least you will have created something. You have to put the right number of time, effort, and care to be able to create an entrepreneurial project. So I would say that find a problem that you love and try. And there is not a good time to become an entrepreneur. I mean, the younger, the more flexibility, the less commitment. You have less financial commitments, less financial liabilities. But at the same time, the older, the more experienced, right? So I would say just go and try. Once you find a problem that you think is worth spending 10 years of your life on, relentlessly, with a lot of energy. If you don't feel that you will be able to do it because you don't love that enough, you will probably give up in the process, and you will not, I mean, waste your time, but you will not get where you hope you need to be.
Okay. So moving on to more particular questions. In portfolio management, information is key to gain an edge. Nowadays, the quality of data is not considered to be really good. There is a lot of noise and biased news outlets. How can one filter this information and get the right one?
Okay, that's a tough question. I can only answer from my experience. But before you know the data that you need to have a clear strategy. You need to know what is your goal, investment goal. So maybe you're a contrarian, so you care a lot about value situation, and you like cheap companies that might have big upside potential. And in that case, valuation is important. If you're a growth investor, you care a lot about the top line, the growth rate, but also the product, the innovation, the competitive advantage that the company is creating. If you're a sustainability investor, you will care a lot about the environment, social and governance issues. And depending on your strategy, the sources that you will consume are very different. Sometimes those are annual reports. Sometimes those are industry reports. I spoke with a VC once he told me that he spends his day reading industry reports. Even though he is investing into companies, he's reading all the time the trends, the industry trends, and the drivers. So you have to read what you think is good for your strategy. And to me, the best tools for this is a tool to be able to process data. So it could be Excel, it could be a database, it could be a table. And you need a tool to process words. So you need a search engine. Google is one of them. You have specialized search engine. At Thread, we're creative one, for example. And I think you have the two tools to match the meaning of the figures with the meaning of the news. And so you try to connect them together to get a clearer picture of any investment opportunities. I would say that those are the basic tools that you need. And then you need a lot of curiosity, because you need to be able to read a lot and be excited about what you do. So my best advice is be curious about what you read and read a lot, and you will eventually make smart decisions.
Yeah, a lot of diligence too, right?
Yeah.
It's all about that, I think. Don't know if you agree with that.
Yeah, so a lot of diligence is important, but quantity is not what is important. It's really the quality of what you read. And so picking your sources and knowing what to look for is more important than just reading thousands and thousands of pages of maybe unrelated topics. Because the more you read, sometimes the more confusing. Sometimes you have like data overload. You read people who say it's great, you read people who say they're risk, and in the end, you don't know what to do. So picking the right topics and picking the right documents is far more important than reading a lot of something that is not of great quality.
Okay, so right now with markets evolving at such a great pace these last few years, what characteristics should a portfolio management group / firm have to be able to generate alpha?
I think alpha is like beating the market. So it's really hard to beat the market if you are the market. And you are the market when you invest in a lot of companies. Like the market generally is a basket of 500 companies, 50 companies, 100 companies. So if you want to beat the market, there are several strategies. I mean, you could use long short, you could use event-driven strategies. There is a lot of documentation on this, but for what I know in the long only business, when you only invest in companies that you think will go up, then you have to stick to a concentrated number of companies. You have to invest in a concentrated portfolio. So 20, 30 company is the maximum, and you have to know them really, really well so that you know when to buy more and where to cut your losses. So due diligence in that regard is important, but you cannot know all companies. So you have to focus on a limited number of opportunities, dig deep into their business model, and stick to it for the long time. If you think about it, the richest people in this world, they own one company mostly. Like Jeff Bezos invested everything he could on Amazon. Elon Musk did it 3 times, but the bulk of his wealth come from Tesla. So investing in one single company might be risky if you don't know that company, if you don't trust that company, right? But if you know it really, really well, that's what all entrepreneurs do. They only invest in their business. And I think it's a way to generate alpha. It probably is not a consistent way to generate alpha every year, but after 10 years, it's a good way to just stick to a few ideas in the long term.
Okay. Well, I think that's everything for the time we have, Keith. It was a pleasure speaking to you. I think you're a really example of a solid natural entrepreneur, even though you didn't know the words. But from really early on, you can tell that you had that type of mindset. I hope you continue to have success in your career, and thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me. It was a pleasure.
It's a pleasure, Keith. Thanks.
Bye.